So good afternoon and welcome to this June Bluetongue webinar. It's great to have you along. My name is Sarah Penrose and I work in the beef and lamb team here at AHDB. So the aim of this afternoon's webinar is to provide an update on the new Bluetongue control measures. So we have representatives from Wales and Scotland to chat through what those new control measures mean for us. So I'm delighted to introduce our guests. Richard Irvine, would you mind just introducing yourself, please? Do we have Richard still with us? Richard was having some technical difficulties, so we'll just check he's still there. Richard, would you just mind introducing yourself to everybody?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Prananda Pal. I'm assuming you can hear me now, Sarah?
Yes, we can.
Fabulous. So, yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to speak at this AHDB webinar. So I'm Richard Irvine, Chief Veterinary Officer for Wales, working in Welsh Government.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Richard. We'll then be coming to Louise. Louise Cameron, do you want to just introduce yourself to our guests?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Louise Cameron. I'm a Senior Policy Manager in the Disease Control Branch at Scottish Government.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us. And last but no means least, we have Zoe Lloyd from AHDB. Do you just want to introduce yourself, Zoe?
Brilliant. Yes. Good evening, everybody. My name is Zoe Lloyd. I'm an animal health and welfare scientist at AHDB, and I'll just be talking you through the new Bluetongue movements checker tool.
Brilliant. Thanks, Zoe. And we do have some other guests that are joining us for the Q&A session as well. So what we're going to plan to do this afternoon is each of our three presenters will give us a quick update presentation, and then it will be question time. So it's really my job to make sure we have enough time to ask lots of your questions. You can send your question in by using the question box on the right hand side of your screen, and I will be keeping an eye on them. What I will do is let each presenter present, so we'll have the three presentations and then we'll have the Q&A. Don't think I'm ignoring your question. If it comes in during the presentations, we will go back to it. So if we don't manage to answer your questions within the 1 hour slot, please can you submit your question via the Ruminant Health and Welfare website. So pop it in there, that'll come along to us and we will make sure we get back to you. So just so you can plan the rest of your evening, we will finish this webinar no later than 6 p.m. The webinar is being recorded and will be circulated to you within the next 24 hours, so watch out for that. Once the webinar has ended, you will be taken to a feedback form. It would be great if you could complete that. It really helps us when we're planning webinars such as this one to make sure we're covering all of the topics that you want. As ever, we will keep updating the Ruminant Health and Welfare and the AHDB websites with any Bluetongue updates and also dates for future webinars. It also includes, so the Ruminant Health and Welfare website also includes a brilliant FAQ section. So if you still have queries after today's webinar, please do head over there if anything is still unclear, and hopefully the answer will be there. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker. So yeah, Richard Irvine from Welsh Government. So over to you, Richard.
Diolch, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Just to do a sound check again, I hope that's all working fine.
It is loud and clear.
Fabulous. Okay, well, once again, thank you for the opportunity to be here this afternoon and to present and obviously hear questions and comments from the audience. By way of an overview, I'll just touch very briefly on some of the contextual matters with regard to B2B3 in Great Britain. I'll then spend a little bit of a longer time summarising the current policy position with regard to Bluetongue in Wales, and touch on Bluetongue vaccination at the end. I could have the next slide, please. So, as I'm sure people are familiar with, we have now temperatures across Great Britain, and particularly in England and parts of Wales, that are consistent with the active transmission of midges that can spread Bluetongue virus. And so from the 20th of June, Wales has implemented a new policy for that active transmission period. The map on the right shows cumulative temperatures over time, and the black coloration, if we roughly draw a line from the Humber estuary to the Mersey and downwards in England and Wales, shows with the black temperatures where the cumulative temperature is sufficient for the midge vector to be considered competent, by which it means that if the midge is infected with B2B3 virus itself, having taken a blood meal from an infected animal, the virus can replicate within the midge, and the midge can then bite another susceptible animal to spread B2B3 virus onto that animal. And with the change in temperatures, that has changed our risk from a Wales point of view, and we also know that the restricted zone in England is going to be expanded to be England-wide from the 1st of July. What is the good news here at this point in time is that no new Bluetongue 3 infections have been confirmed during this season. But I think we all have a sense of perhaps foreboding, but certainly recognition that Bluetongue virus 3 infections are very likely. The risk is high, and with the temperatures we're now seeing, the vector competence period for active transmission is present. If I can have the next slide, please. So from a position in Wales, since the 20th of June, Wales will accept movements to live of susceptible livestock species from a Bluetongue restricted zone, subject to a negative pre-movement test and under licence issued by APHA. The exception, in inverted commas, to that is cattle that have been fully vaccinated with a specific vaccine product, the Bluetongue 3 product, and are healthy, can move from a restricted zone into Wales to live without a pre-movement test, but will still require a licence. It's important to note that fully vaccinated means that cattle have received both doses of the primary course, 2 doses of Bluetongue 3, and that at least 21 days have elapsed from the second dose to enable the immune system to work and have an onset of immunity. The 2-course dose and the 21-day period to allow onset of immunity are the specifications on the product data sheet. As mentioned, all movements will require a specific license, which is issued by APHA. I have links included, I think, at the end of this presentation that you can access for further information. And it's crucial to remember that if an animal is showing clinical signs, is ill on the day of transport, they cannot and should not be moved. Can I have the next slide, please? When considering movements direct to slaughter into Wales, these movements do not require pre-movement test, but from the 1st of July, movements direct to slaughter must be to a designated slaughterhouse if coming to Wales. There are also rules and licenses relevant for movements from Wales to shows or markets in the restricted zone and requirements therein that relate to isolation and post-movement testing. There are other licenses available for moves such as to a veterinary practice and other such moves. Again, information is available on gov.wales with regard to the types of movements you might be thinking about and the relevant policy and licensing requirements. So please do visit the Bluetongue pages on gov.wales, and please remember that the licensing requirements would be issued through APHA. Finally, to note that the Bluetongue policy in Wales is being kept under regular review. Next slide, please. This schematic is just to give a visual representation of different types of move between England and Wales. And I'm not going to run through all of the details on this now, but this graphic is available again on our gov.wales web pages relating to Bluetongue. So please do scrutinise this information. Please do look at the graphic, and as I say, then it will help you to assess the types of movement that are possible, the licensing and testing requirements, and as I said, the information online also includes the types of different license and the different requirements that are necessary. But this schematic summarises those types of move, for example, between sales or shows, slaughterhouses, or farms. So please do look at it. Next slide, please. And in developing these different requirements, there's been extensive discussion over quite some months involving the industry, different sectors of the industry, and veterinary sectors. That culminated in a round table chaired by the Deputy First Minister several weeks ago. And particularly noting that the restricted zone will be moving on the 1st of July to be England-wide, it's recognised that the potential for Bluetongue 3 infected livestock to move up to the Welsh border when the RZ expands to the whole of England, that then increases the risk of BTV3 incursion into Wales due to the possibility of infection being also then in midges that could blow across the border. But that movement of livestock within the restricted zone, that free movement of livestock within the restricted zone come the 1st of July, brings the disease risk closer to the border and that possibility of midges then, should they be infected with Bluetongue, blowing across the border into Wales. It's also relevant, I think, to note that the risk of midge incursion, recognising the controls relating to livestock movement, the risk of midge incursion is not uniform across Wales. Those border counties clearly are at the sharp end, if you will. I think it's also important that we all recognise that the severity and impacts of Bluetongue in livestock dense areas is unknown. To date, we have seen Bluetongue in England in lower livestock density areas, and we have not seen Bluetongue in livestock dense areas for sheep or cattle. It's recognised what the severity of disease and other production impacts have been in European countries, which we would recognise as being livestock dense. And as I say, it is unknown as to how the disease will behave should it arrive in livestock dense areas of Great Britain. An open border policy would also immediately increase the risk to livestock across the whole of Wales. And we know from past experience last year that long distance livestock movements introduced BTV3 through stock movements into Wales. And the final point is the importance of vaccination. Whilst vaccination levels are relatively low at the moment, it is clearly recognised that demand for vaccine is increasing. It's also recognised that vaccine supply through the 3 pharmaceutical companies has improved. And we're working closely on a continual basis, on a regular basis, with those vaccine manufacturers. The more we can do to slow down BTB spread, to buy time, in inverted commas, the better for animal health and welfare, fertility and productivity. And it is to underline the importance of vaccines with regard to BTB3. Next slide, please. So these are the slightly out-of-date vaccination rates in Wales. In the last 10 minutes, I received some updated data that indicates that actually vets have reported over 95,000 animals to have been vaccinated. So that has been a quantum leap in the last week or so from the 63 odd thousand that are reported on this slide. And as mentioned, vaccine supply has been an issue that is recognised, but is improving nationally. And the work continues with the vaccine manufacturers, who are also reporting themselves that their vaccine supply will meet demand. But it is also important that if you are considering vaccination as a farmer, as a keeper, please talk to your vet to establish whether vaccination would be appropriate to your business, so that orders can be logged by veterinary surgeons to then provide vaccine where it is relevant and appropriate for your herd or flock. Next slide, please. And as part of that conversation and considering the appropriate use and relevance of BTB3 vaccines for your herd or flock, and indeed if you're a veterinarian, to have those conversations about vaccination with clients, AHDB and the Ruminant Health and Welfare Group have resources and advice on their website, on the Ruminant Health and Welfare Group website, for vets and farmers relating to the 3 vaccine products that are commercially available and their use, and also recognising the work that AHDB and the Ruminant Health and Welfare Group have done together to bring forward this information and the tools and resources that are available to inform decision making by farmers and vets, working together to determine whether vaccine is appropriate for your herd or flock, and to inform the uptake of vaccine. The impact will be, I'm sure, that the uptake of vaccine will increase through the use of these tools. So please do, if you have not yet already, look at the available information, have that conversation with your vet. If you're a veterinarian, I know that conversations are happening with clients as well as placing orders for those herds and flocks where BTB3 vaccine is deemed to be appropriate. 2 final points on vaccination. It is recognised that there's been widespread vaccination in European countries where BTB3 has been confirmed, and indeed in some cases devastating over the last 18 months or 2 years. And the feedback and information from those countries, and indeed the pharmaceutical companies, is that widespread vaccination in these countries has not been associated with notable negative impacts on livestock health, welfare, fertility or productivity. And finally, to note that one vaccine product is on its data sheet providing a claim of prevention of viremia in cattle, meaning the immune response using that vaccine, Bultavo, when fully vaccinated, used in accordance with the data sheet when used in cattle, the prevent viremia claim on the data sheet basically means that virus, if the cow or heifer, the animal, is infected, that the virus does not get into the bloodstream. That is really important, because if the virus is not in the bloodstream because of the prevent viremia claim and the efficacy of the vaccine, the virus cannot then be fed on by the midge because the blood meal would not contain infectious virus. So the distinction being a prevent viremia claim means the animal cannot then be onwardly infectious for the midge. Reduction of viremia claims mean that there is the potential for there to be an infectious virus in the bloodstream for the midge to feed on and therefore spread disease. I said at the top there'll be further information. Here are some links. First off, to how to report the vaccine prescription and use if you're a vet or a farmer, and if you are looking to need a movement license of different types, there's information freely available with regard to those different types of license and the requirements that these licenses carry with them. And finally, as I'm sure we all recognise, as a notifiable disease, vigilance is also crucial to understand where disease may occur, to also understand if the severity and impact of Bluetongue 3 is changing. And if you do see suspect disease, please report it in the usual way to APHA using the numbers you can see on the screen, depending on where you may be located in Great Britain. But maintaining vigilance so we can understand if the disease is spreading, we can understand the impact of the disease, if the severity is changing, and then to be able to take relevant measures as appropriate if disease is indeed confirmed. And please, as I say, call APHA as a notifiable disease. It is a legal requirement to report suspicion in the usual way using these numbers. Next slide, please. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. Thank you very much for listening and your attention. Diolch yn gwrando in Welsh. I will stop there and hand back to Sarah to continue the agenda. Diolch.
Thank you ever so much, Richard. And like I say, Richard will be available to answer your questions after we've heard from our next speaker and Zoe as well. Louise Cameron will be our next speaker. She will be talking about the new control measures being introduced within Scotland. So over to you, Louise.
Thank you. Can I just check you can see my screen okay?
You can. Yes, it's just come up now. We're all good to go.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you, Richard, for your presentation. I'm just going to talk in a little bit more detail about the licenses that we've put in place over the last couple of weeks and the movement controls that accompany them. So we've worked very closely with Welsh Government and DEFRA over the last couple of weeks to develop a suite of licenses in line with the new controls. So I'll just talk through these, but they're all this information is available on gov.scot as well, with links to the relevant licenses so that you can go and look at them yourselves if you're interested in using any of them. So initially, I just want to talk through movements to live. So we will now require pre-movement testing with negative results for all movements that originate from the restricted zone to live in Scotland or Wales. The exception to this is that we will allow movement of cattle that are vaccinated with the Boehringer Ingelheim 3 vaccine, so they will be exempt from any pre-movement or post-movement testing. There's currently no testing exemptions for vaccinated sheep, but this is something we keep under continual review. So moves from the restricted zone to live in Scotland or Wales need a specific licence, which can be applied for via gov.uk through the APHA portal. And the licence needed is the EXD 597, where the conditions are the same for Scotland and Wales. Also on gov.uk and linked to on gov.scot, there's an EXD 645, which is a pro forma document, which if you're looking to make this move from the restricted zone to live in Scotland or Wales, you should complete to accompany your application. So the pro forma document gives you the opportunity to declare if you're moving animals with pre-movement testing or if you're moving them with vaccine in the case of cattle that are vaccinated with Ingelheim 3. And we're also undertaking compliance checks with APHA to ensure that those movement requirements are being met. If you are making a move from a free area to another free area, so for example from Scotland to Wales or vice versa, there's no need for testing. There's just a requirement that there's no stops in the RZ other than those permitted under the general licence. And any moves within Scotland do not require any testing, given that it's a free area, and movements from Scotland to the restricted zone in England won't require testing either. I should just point out as well the current testing validity. Up until the 1st of July, the pre-movement testing validity is 10 calendar days. And from the 1st of July onwards, tests are only valid for 7 calendar days. So we would recommend taking time to plan when you require pre-movement testing. So we've also developed a licence for moves to markets. So from a Scotland point of view and Wales point of view, animals may move to an English market without testing. The policy is for us that if the animals are returning to Scotland within 4 calendar days of their departure, they require post-movement testing and isolation when they return to Scotland, and that's within 6 to 10 days of their return to Scotland to the original premises. If the animals remain in the restricted zone at the market for more than 4 days, we require pre-movement testing in the restricted zone before they can transit back to Scotland. And this movement takes place with the AHDB 608 general licence. And again, that's a Scotland and Wales general licence to allow movements from the restricted zone to Scotland and Wales. And the other licence which we have developed is the moves to slaughter licence. So that's for movements from the restricted zone to slaughter in Scotland. This doesn't require any pre-movement testing, but the animals must go directly to the designated abattoir after leaving the restricted zone. And we currently have 3 designated abattoirs in Scotland, which are all outlined on gov.scot. Slaughter must take place within 24 hours of arrival, and there are conditions within this general licence around appropriate use of insecticide when the transport is taking place, and also planning those movements to align with dawn and dusk conditions so that the animals are not travelling during the periods of the day where there's high vector activity. And this move can take place with the general licence, the AHDB 603, which is currently a Scotland only licence. We also are looking at a number of other licences at the moment, so we're looking at finalising the movements to shows licence by hopefully the end of this week. And we're also considering our position on germinal products and performance animals, and we're working at the minute with Welsh Government on the performance animals licence. And just to finish, I thought I would also put in the vaccine prescription figures that we have so far. So we are still waiting a report from Scotty ID on the figures reported by keepers, but so far prescribed in Scotland, we've got about 43,500 sheep which have been vaccinated, and another 7,500 cattle which have been prescribed vaccine. But just to conclude, if you need any more information on this, there is good information available on gov.scot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. So our final presentation this afternoon will come from Zoe Lloyd, and she's going to chat to us about the new Bluetongue movements checker. So over to you, Zoe, and then we will have the Q&A session. So please do keep sending your questions in for that. All right, thanks, Zoe.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sarah. Hello everyone, I'm very pleased to announce that we have our Bluetongue Movements Checker up and running. This is the latest resource to be added to the Battle Bluetongue toolkit for farmers and vets. We have primarily created this tool in response to the complex and changing restrictions that are impacting livestock movements between England, Scotland and Wales. These restrictions, as mentioned earlier by Richard and Louise there, have been put in place to help reduce the risk of Bluetongue spread. However, we do appreciate there is a lot to digest and it can be quite tricky to navigate as well. So this tool was produced by AHDB and Ruminant Health and Welfare, and it's designed to be an interactive online tool which allows farmers to see what movements are allowed and what movement licenses are needed. This will also inform you of when pre-movement testing and/or vaccination is required as a legal requirement. We've broken this tool down into farm premises, shows, markets, and abattoirs, so farmers can check exactly what is required for that movement. Of course, taking into account the government policies across England, Wales, and Scotland. We were really keen to get this launched this week as we appreciate the All England Bluetongue restriction zone comes into place on Tuesday, and we really wanted to help support farmers with questions that you'll likely have when it comes to moving your stock. Also, as we know, Bluetongue is an ever-evolving situation, so it was also important to us to create something that could be easily reviewed to make it as robust and accurate as possible. And we will update this as and when required. There is a date at the start of the checker for when it was last updated, so please keep this in mind when working through the information, especially if there have been recent changes to policy. We found setting this tool up as a survey was the easiest way going forward to update, whilst also maintaining that user-friendly resource. However, it is important to note that this does not collect any personal data or information. It will also not ask for any personal details unless you wish to get the results sent to you by email, in which case this is completely your choice. We won't be using any data or results from this tool in any way. Before I show you a few examples, I just wanted to say a big thank you to DEFRA, Scottish Government and Welsh Government for their input on this checker. It was really important to us that we encompassed all the key information from their policies. If I could have the next slide, please. So this here is just an example of sort of how the checker works. It will ask you where you and your animals are, whether it's England, Wales or Scotland, and where you'd like to move them to based off your previous answer. Here, for example, I have said I'm in England and I would like to move to Wales. And then you'll be asked where in Wales you'd like to travel to, either a farm, a show, market, abattoir or other. And from here, I've selected show, and then it explains that to move from England to a show in Wales, you will need a specific Bluetongue movement licence and a valid pre-movement test at your expense, or full vaccination with the Bultavo 3 vaccine for cattle only. It then explains that if your animal is showing clinical signs, you cannot move into Wales, and that before travelling to a show, it is important to check the specific show's Bluetongue policy and requirements, as they might have implemented additional control measures. If I could have the next slide, please. And then this here is just another example. So here I've said I'm in England and I'd like to move to a Scottish market. For this move, as you can see, the checker has highlighted that I will need to pre-movement test my animals and or vaccinate with Bultavo 3 in my cattle. So it is quite a nice step-by-step sort of tool here. It's also worth noting that where the movement checker mentions travel regulations for animals not under Bluetongue restrictions, this is not referring to the England restricted zone. This is referring to animals or farms that are under Bluetongue restrictions, for example, from testing positive for Bluetongue. So if you would like to access the Bluetongue movement checker, please go to the Ruminant Health and Welfare website. You will find it here alongside a whole range of FAQs and other useful resources around vaccination, movements, general queries, etc. So please do check this out. Equally, if the movement checker does not answer your question, please do feel free to get in touch with us through email, through the Ruminant Health and Welfare website, or by calling us on the Bluetongue hotline. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zoe. So that looks like a really useful tool. So yeah, let's go onto the website and use that. If I could have all of our speakers back on, please. We'll have the Q&A session now. We can lose the slides, so it's just us on screen. Lovely. It's important to note as well, we do have some extra people that will be joining us for the Q&A. So brilliant. Hiya, Jim. Jim, do you just want to introduce yourself before we start?
Hi, I'm Jim. I'm a vet in practice in West Wales.
Lovely. Thank you. And Gareth, do you just want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, hello. I'm now retired, but I'm the Senior Vice President of the British Veterinary Association Scottish branch, and when I was working in disease surveillance, and I've got a background in working with Bluetongue this time and the previous time.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So first question, I think this is for you, Richard. If a farmer has two holdings, one in Wales and one in England, will they still need a pre-movement test between their holdings?
The short answer is yes, if CPHs are different. If you are operating across the England-Wales border within one CPH, the answer is no.
Right, because that was a second question. So for Welsh farms with a Welsh CPH, but with land extending into England, will they be treated as English farms for the purpose of the BTV policy, or will it be Welsh?
Yeah, in short, if you are operating on an England-Wales cross-border basis within one CPH, that is characterised as, in inverted commas, one farm,
Right.
and pre-movement testing would not be needed because it is under one CPH, albeit crossing the border, remembering, of course, I'm speaking as CVO Wales with Welsh farms in mind, and if I can put it so simply, Welsh rules. So if you're a Welsh farm with a CPH, one CPH, but your farm crosses the border, then if it's operating under a single CPH, there is no testing requirement.
Right. Gareth, do you want to input into anything with relating to that question if it was across the border?
There's nothing specific to add to that, thanks. Yep.
Lovely. Okay. So, next question. Animals that are currently residing in the free area in England, are they able to move freely into Wales or Scotland before the 1st of July? So again, I'll come to you, Richard, first, and then I'll come to you, Louise.
Sure. So if I've understood the question correctly, Sarah, what we're describing is the current RZ.
Exactly, yes.
Which obviously is not England-wide, albeit it does cover a rather large proportion of England. No. So based on the current RZ in England, the free area of England does not require pre-movement testing because it is not an RZ, it is free area. So stock who are in the free area of England, based upon the current designations, can move into Wales without a pre-movement test because it is free area.
Perfect, and that's until the 1st of July. Louise?
Correct. Once it's a RZ across England, or indeed if it's a movement out of the current RZ in England, then testing would be necessary, with the exception of cattle fully vaccinated with Bultavo 3, subject to those conditions, which are set out also on the licence that I mentioned during the presentation. So I hope that makes sense, Sarah.
It does. Thank you very much. Louise, does the same apply for you?
Yeah, just to confirm, the position's the same in Scotland. So not currently if you're leaving a free area, but if you're leaving the current restricted zone, they'd need to test or have cattle vaccinated with Bultavo 3. Okay. So the same position, yeah.
Perfect. So this is an interesting question. Obviously, we've covered a lot about live animals and animals going to slaughter. What about semen? So semen crossing borders for use of AI, are there any specific rules and regulations around that? I'll come to you, Gareth, first, if that's okay.
Yeah, so Bluetongue is transmissible through semen, so those animals very much need to be controlled. So there are controls on both their movements and there's control on the products, and there's a testing regime for example, for donor AI, donor embryo, donor egg animals which generally involves semen PCR testing. So they need to be very strictly controlled. There's evidence that the second big Bluetongue 8 outbreak in France was likely spread by semen. So it's very much part of the control mechanisms. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Louise and Richard, do you have anything to input into that, or are you happy?
I was just going to add that we're still just ironing out the details of the germinal product policy with the Scottish Government, but we will be looking to update gov.scot once that's been decided, and it should be within the next week or so.
Okay, perfect. There was another question. I'm going to come to you, Jim, so you don't feel left out. Will the vaccination have any effect on fertility? So they're specifically focused on RAMS and AI programs for sheep. The question goes on to say, with so much social media and news coverage now, I've yet to hear a huge disaster with Bluetongue. What is the biggest single farm fatality number so far? So I think that's just asking, has it been shown to have any impact on fertility rates?
So the short answer is no, but in the data sheet it's a little bit vague because they haven't got the sort of the data to back it up. But certainly reports from across Europe and from sort of the east of England, where it's been used a lot more than the west, and particularly in Wales, it's there's no real adverse effects seen. So I think the key thing really is to talk to your vet about when you want to use the vaccine, when you're likely to be using these rams, when you're likely to be using these bulls, and base it on the risk. But it is worth mentioning that if the virus gets into those rams or those bulls, it's going to have a massive detrimental effect on their fertility, and you've got to weigh that up versus the vaccination.
That's it. No, thank you. Gareth, do you have anything to input into that?
Yeah, so the only other thing to say to add to what Jim's just said is that is the most important part of that is having the conversation with your vet. It's about getting the animals vaccinated ahead of any particular risk period. So that's making sure that they're fully protected before service. There's been clear evidence that in bulls in particular, that there have been some quite marked fertility impacts of Bluetongue 3 disease. And the important thing is to get the vaccine in there ahead of that potential happening.
Okay. Great, thank you. So whilst we're on the theme of semen, I have another question. So semen that was collected before the outbreak, so let's say in 2020, would that semen also need to be tested before leaving England? Gareth, sorry, I'll come to you, or if there's anybody else who thinks they can answer that.
Yeah.
It's a very good question.
It is a good question, and I think it would depend on the individual circumstances of how the semen was collected, where it was stored, what the evidence base for it being, collected ahead of Bluetongue being present in the UK. But government colleagues might know more about the specifics of that, so I'll defer to them.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. I'll chip in if that's all right, Sarah.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. So I think, as you rightly said, Gareth, a lot hinges here on demonstrating and evidencing that timeline, taking that hypothetical scenario you set out from the question, Sarah. So subject to it being evidenced around storage and handling and the timing being prior to BTB3 having entered Great Britain, then that kind of use and move should be possible. It's really important that people study the license conditions, because that is where the terms and conditions, the rules, if you like, are set out, whether it's for the movement of germinal products like semen and ova, whether that's for livestock movements. The license sets out the requirements, the rules. So please make use of the information available online to study those licenses, because then if those conditions can be met, you have the answer. It is the simplest way of putting it. And being able to evidence the licensing conditions where we're talking about, let's take the germinal products example, is fundamental. So just to stay on that for a moment, going back to the earlier question, it's also part of the protocols that breeding facilities will have, artificial breeding facilities will have with regard to their testing of stock, the bulls that they may have standing, as an example. And again, alongside that, again, ensuring license conditions are met, etc., etc. So licenses are key here,
right?
To understand the detail, to then be able to determine the movements being possible or not. And we have worked with our, in inverted commas, in Wales, breeding facilities as part of all of this too. So they're fully in the loop, so to speak. So I hope that makes sense in helping to answer the question.
It does. Thank you ever so much. Thank you for that. So another question, because I know it can seem quite confusing. Obviously, we're talking about moving animals across borders. But Gareth, can I come to you with this one? The question is, can you move between different holdings within the same counties in England? So either before the 1st of July or after the 1st of July.
Well, certainly after the 1st of July, you can move anywhere, because it's one RZ. Before that, if it's movement out of the zone, then you will require a license to do that. And again, I'd point you to the movement checker to determine that. I think that's going to be a really useful tool, because it'll nail into some of the detail for you.
Yeah, and so we just coming to you with the movement tracker. Does that kind of just come into play from the 1st of July? So if somebody's wanting to move animals within England, but to different counties, then so use that after the 1st of July.
Yes, that's right. It'll be, all the information is correct from the 1st of July.
Brilliant. Let's have a look. What else have we got? So this, how many cases have there been in the UK in total of both cattle and sheep? So I presume this is BTV3. Would anybody like to take that question?
Well, I can start by giving some of the figures, some of the report cases that we've had that get reported. So up until the start of this week, there'd been 622 reports, of which 262 were confirmed as Bluetongue 3. We've had one of Bluetongue 12 concurrently on the same holding in England. We've had 362 negated. So those are the numbers. I'm sorry, I don't have the breakdown between cattle and sheep, and that doesn't give the numbers of animals involved. But that's investigations for Bluetongue 3.
Lovely. And are they active cases this year? Do we know?
That's
sorry.
No, that's since,
isn't it, this?
Yeah, that's since we first encountered BTV.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Richard?
Yeah, sorry. Trying to raise the little hand function. I'm not sure if it's working or not. But you can hear me. So yeah, yes. Gareth set out the headline figures perfectly. And to try and answer the last question, if I've understood it correctly, we have to consider what we might characterise as the current season. So if we're considering the current vector active season, whereby the temperatures are sufficient for that midge to be able to incubate and spread the virus, which is only just starting, only just started, then the new case count for new confirmations of BTB3 is 0.
Yeah.
We have not yet had a new confirmation.
Okay.
We have seen across different parts of England overwintering of BTB3, whereby, for example, calves born with deformities were demonstrated to have BTB3 infection because they were infected as calves in the womb. There's also been reports in some suckler herds of infertility as a consequence of BTB3. And as noted rightly earlier, when the vaccine questions were being asked with regard to fertility or infertility, I think the answer given, I completely agree with, that there is not evidence to show infertility. The data sheet, as Jim said, is a little vague, but conversely, in European countries where BTB3 has been widespread, there is very clear evidence of not just mortality and illness, but fertility and productivity losses as well.
Okay.
So the disease in its severe forms, like has been seen across Europe, the Netherlands being an example, clearly show clinical impact, fertility impact, and productivity impact.
Right.
The final point I'll make, if you'll allow me, Sarah,
Yes,
is in last season, which came to an end when the temperatures cooled, we got into the winter period. Last season, we did have 2 BTB3 detections in sheep in Wales last autumn, and those BTB3 infections were directly because of infected livestock, infected sheep, moving out of the high-risk area in the east of England, carrying BTB3 in them, in inverted commas, as infected sheep, and then being purchased and arriving on farms in 2 farms in Wales. So that demonstrates the clear concern. I highlighted it in my presentation also. Livestock movements, long distance livestock movements included, of infected stock coming out of a high risk area carrying infection. The final point there being is that by bringing disease into a free area, a new area, it then sets up the possibility, it seeds the possibility of those livestock being a potential for midges to then feed on. So the local midge, in my case the Welsh midge, could then become infected itself, feeding off those infected livestock that moved into Wales. Now, thankfully, last season, that did not occur in terms of the Welsh midge becoming infected. But that's the risk, if you will, of those livestock movements, infected livestock movements, seeding infection into a new area by carrying it in their bloodstream, and then the midge feeding on that infected blood to then be able to become infected as midges themselves, who can then go on to bite other livestock and transmit the virus through that midge bite. So I apologise for the long answer, Sarah, but I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a really important one because I know the farmers I speak to, they do ask for the figures. And when we say, well, actually, there hasn't been any this year, you think, well, why are we bothering vaccinating? And it is such an important message that it is about that prevention of exactly everything you've just outlined there. So thank you very much for that, Richard. I might come to you, Louise, with this one, because it is from a Scottish vet. So what restrictions are implemented on a farm when a case of bluetongue is confirmed? And I presume it'll be the same across all 3 countries, will it?
Not necessarily, I don't think, because it depends. So if we were to get an incursion in Scotland, it would probably be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, but an initial incursion, and keep me right because I'm not a vet, so if I'm saying the wrong thing, someone please do interrupt me. But if we were, Esther was on the line as well, but if we were to have an initial incursion of a case of Bluetongue, it's likely that we would cull the animal, and then we would undertake surveillance in the local midge population to understand if there's been further transmission into the local midge population. And from that point, we would look to probably declare a temporary control zone or something similar. Esteban, do you have anything further to add on that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. And hi, everybody. I'm one of the vets in Scottish Government. It's about establishing whether it's a new incursion, and we had an incursion back in 2024 from an imported animal, which was detected in time because we're post-import testing these animals, and then we tested the rest of the herd, and we were comfortable that there was no further spread. So the original animal, I believe, was culled, and in order to reduce any risk of further transmission, and while Scotland remains a free area, that should be the standard approach to cull an infected animal. In addition to all this, epidemiological investigation would be conducted on the farm to ascertain where the animal came from. Is it a local animal? And all sorts of other things, any potential tracings of that farm, but all to be guided by the investigation, but with a precautionary approach. So restrictions, to answer the question directly, would probably be on the whole farm until the investigation is completed, and on susceptible animals, of course.
And dare I ask, does the farmer get compensated for that animal, or is it just, yeah?
Yes, the farmer would be compensated.
Okay, thank you. Richard, what's the story in Wales?
Yeah, so I think Louise and Esteban have answered it very clearly and comprehensively. So on the current situation, for an index case, a first case, a new incursion, as Esteban rightly characterised it, the situation would be the same. The crucial element here is that we have to remember also to take a case-by-case approach, because there are different ways that Bluetongue can, and certainly as just described, has entered different parts of Great Britain. The final point to make is, and it would be ideal for DEFRA colleagues to be able to comment on this far more accurately than I can, but information is also available on gov.uk, that because in a nutshell, Wales and Scotland are free areas. We do not have evidence of BTB3. We have not had confirmed cases of BTB3 in this season, nor in Wales's case since those cases last autumn. Because we're free area, we would be taking those kind of approaches. England clearly has got Bluetongue historically, and that's why there is a restricted zone, and the rules are different. I think it's the simplest thing to say in England, rather than the free area of Scotland and the free area of Wales. But I'll say no more for fear of getting it wrong for our England colleagues. But as I say, the DEFRA website and gov.uk carry the relevant information as it pertains to England.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think it's important to say that we are hosting another webinar next week, same time, and DEFRA colleagues will be on that one. So if you have any questions for them, please do listen to that webinar. Gareth, do you have anything to add to that, or do you think it's all been covered?
No, I think I don't want to muddy the water.
Yeah, no. I think yeah. Lovely, thank you. So I just have two questions that I haven't yet asked. So if it's okay with you, we'll just carry on just for a couple of minutes to make sure we answer everybody's queries. So Jim, I'll come to you again for this one. And this just asks, how long will each vaccination last?
So that's a very good question, and on the data sheet we don't know. There seems to be some evidence from Europe that the vaccine's working for up to a year, but there's been nothing published, and the vaccine companies haven't agreed anything yet within their data sheets.
Okay, so what are the recommendations then we're providing to farmers? Do we think this is going to be an annual thing, or Gareth,
Well,
from
it's an unknown, isn't it, as to what's
yeah,
the virus going to do over the next few
okay,
years, or whatever, isn't it? But I'm sure
okay,
Gareth will have input into that.
Well, if I could just come back on that, I think remember that these vaccines have been produced at great, commendable speed. Initially under an emergency authorization, now they're developing their marketing authorization, which is the evidence base behind the vaccines that all manufacturers have to provide for any pharmaceutical product that's used on an animal. So there's nothing special about there. That the criteria all remain the same. They have been built around on the same platforms, using the same principles as the BTV8 vaccines, Bluetongue 8, and so we can expect them to perform in similar ways. What needs to happen, though, is time for the manufacturers to do the standard statutory investigation procedures that they're required to do to provide the evidence, and that takes time. So we will expect this evidence to become available from the manufacturers in due course. But it will come in dribs and drabs as the trials come to fruition, because they do take a significant number of times. So my expectation would be, and my understanding is that they would be aiming for a year for all the vaccines, though we haven't got the evidence base for that yet.
right, okay, so they're just working on that. Richard or Stavo, I noticed you had your hands raised. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think Gareth covered it very clearly and comprehensively, as did Jim. The only thing I would add is to repeat the point that the data sheet, that bit of paper that's in the box along with the vaccine vial, is the key bit of information to read. And data sheets are available, I'm sure, online from the vaccine manufacturers, because not only does it describe the dose requirements for sheep and cattle, it also includes information about the vaccine claims, by which I mean their effectiveness in terms of reduction of viremia, i.e. virus in the bloodstream, or prevention of viremia. But as I say, Gareth described it very eloquently in the pharmaceutical companies working further to develop data that then we all hope will be included in the data sheets, which are that key piece of information for vets and farmers to follow to understand the product. And again, I'll repeat what I said earlier. The Ruminant Health and Welfare Group and AHDB resources online under the Battle Bluetongue campaign are incredibly helpful for vets and farmers to be able to then sort of drill down into this information and use the tools available to inform decision making whether vaccine is appropriate for your herd or flock, recognizing each business is different. So please do talk to your vet if you're a farmer. I know vets are talking with their clients and deploying and prescribing vaccine, and using this time we have now to have those conversations to determine the utility of vaccination as a fundamental tool in the box against Bluetongue is crucial.
Yeah, very well said, Richard. And like Richard said, if you head onto the Ruminant Health and Welfare website, there is actually a vaccine comparison table on there. So the vets and farmers, please do go and check that out. I do actually have a copy on my desk because it's a really useful document, so do print that off. So the final question, so we're going back to semen again. As a farmer, how do you know that the semen purchased, so the stuff you have in your flasks, is free from BTV? Would anybody like to take that question? I've got no takers. Would anybody like a stab at it? Oh, brilliant, Estavo. Thank you very much.
I'll have to go because it's an important question that should be unanswered. Even if I can't do the best that could be done answering, I'll try.
Thank you.
So ultimately, the control on breeding, the breeding controls in relation to Bluetongue are managed by the declaration of a restricted zone where the disease is, which is currently England. And it basically says, like Richard earlier put very well, those products, the general meat products, are controlled by a license in order to leave the zone. So if a farmer is being presented with semen which originated in a zone, it should have been produced under license, and that's the responsibility of the approved insemination center that is producing that semen. So there's no restrictions of trading semen within the zone, in the same way there won't be restrictions on animals moving across, but semen that is out of the zone must be from animals that were eligible to leave the zone because they were safe enough to leave that zone. And on top of that, breeding companies will conduct additional testing to be on the safe side. So it's very much so the government intervention aspect is the movement out of a zone, the commercialization of it, and aspect is that relationship between the company providing the semen and the purchaser.
Thank you, Richard. So if a farmer does have semen in the flask, what can they do? Do they just presume it's okay, or do they get it tested? What are we recommending?
Well, I think Estevo summarised nicely. If in terms of the requirements to have license to leave a restricted zone,
Yeah.
okay, and those conditions, if you will, that are set out in the license, as well as the testing protocols that will be in place at artificial breeding centres with standing bulls, etc., etc. Okay,
Yeah.
I think it's a really good question, and all the questions, I should say, have been really good.
They have.
Because these are important topics, and it's really helpful to hear the questions. The final thing I'll say with regard to this one is not just ask the question here today, but ask the supplier. Say, talk to your vet, and understand the provenance, if you will. Because, as I say, we are living in a different time now with Bluetongue serotype 3 having been in England for 18 months or so. I probably got that date wrong, forgive me.
We won't hold you to it.
But, we are in that different time. So understanding the disease risk, depending on where you are in Great Britain and your farm business, is fundamental. And talking with your vet and others to take advice, to understand what it means for you, the choices you have in front of you, whether that is vaccination or other. Now is the time to be having those conversations if you haven't had them already, because we have this time to use wisely to put the protective measures and understand the situation well. So I know I'm repeating myself on that, Sarah, but
no,
as I say, it's the conversations between vets and farmers and vets, taking advice to understand what we have in front of us, depending on where you are in Great Britain, and making use of the tools to then inform decisions, which also should include, I hope, consideration of vaccination.
Brilliant. And I think that's a great way to finish the webinar. Thank you so much, Richard. As Richard says, please do talk to your vet and get those answers. I am really sorry we have run over by a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure all of the questions were answered. Thank you so much to our guests this evening and for answering some really tricky questions. I really hope this webinar has ironed out some of your queries. So we are hosting another webinar. As I said, it's next Wednesday, so that's the 2nd of July, same time, so 5 p.m, where we'll discuss the impacts of the different control measures across England, Wales and Scotland, specifically on markets and trade. So that'll be a really good one. Please register via the usual way, so on the AHDB website. And please remember, if there are any unanswered questions, please do submit them to us via the Ruminant Health and Welfare website, and we will make sure we answer those. I just wanted to say a final thank you to all the different organisations involved in Battle Bluetongue. It isn't just AHDB, and we are ever so grateful for their support. So thanks again for joining me this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.